The Emergency Council chamber of the Galactic Federation buzzed with panic. Representatives from 12 different species crowded around the holographic display showing the devastation. The Vorthan Empire had struck again, their black ships cutting through Federation space like knives through silk. Admiral Zextal of the Altarian Navy stood at the center of the chaos, his forearms gesturing frantically at the tactical display. "They've taken the Kepler system," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. 17 colonies. 3 million civilians. The assembled delegates erupted in frightened chatter. The crystalline ambassadors' forms shimmered with anxiety, while the fur on the Luparian representatives stood on end. Even the usually calm Etherians flickered between dimensions nervously. "We need allies," declared Councillor Veltar, the senior Altarian diplomat. "Someone with military strength we haven't considered." "We've contacted everyone," replied the Luparian delegate, his growl tinged with desperation. "The hegemony won't answer our calls. The Synthesis Collective considers this an internal matter." Zextal pulled up the star charts, his primary eyes scanning the outer rim territories. "What about the unexplored sectors? Surely there are civilizations we haven't made contact with." "The outer rim is mostly dead space," muttered the crystalline ambassador through harmonic vibrations. "Radiation zones, asteroid fields, systems too hostile for intelligent life." "Wait." A junior Altarian technician raised one tentacle hesitantly. "There was a survey report filed 3 cycles ago. Long-range sensors detected organized electromagnetic signatures from a system designated Sol 3. The readings suggested industrial civilization." The room fell silent. Veltar leaned forward, his compound eyes focusing intently. "Why wasn't this investigated?" "The system is located in what we classified as the Terran Death Zone," the technician explained nervously. "Extreme radiation from their star, gravitational anomalies, and the planet itself showed impossible readings. Atmospheric composition that should be toxic, surface temperatures that fluctuate wildly, and massive electromagnetic storms." "A death world," whispered the Etherian representative. "No wonder we ignored it." Admiral Zextal studied the data streaming across his personal display. The planet designated as Terra showed signs of massive industrial activity despite conditions that would kill most known species within minutes. If they've survived in those conditions, they might be tougher than we assumed. "Or completely primitive," countered the Luparian. "Probably still using combustion engines and chemical weapons." "Primitive species don't generate these energy signatures," the technician insisted, highlighting sections of the sensor data. "These readings suggest fusion power, possibly antimatter containment, and coordinated orbital infrastructure." Councillor Veltar made the decision that would change galactic history. "Send them a distress signal. Standard Federation emergency protocols. If they're advanced enough to receive it, they might be advanced enough to help." "Sir," the technician hesitated. "Our xenobiologists estimate that any species evolving on that death world would be extremely aggressive. Predatory by necessity. If we contact them, we're already facing extinction," Veltar replied grimly. "What's one more threat?" The message was crafted carefully. A standard Federation distress beacon explaining their situation, their technological level, and requesting military assistance against the Vorthan Empire. They included tactical data, star charts, and cultural information packages designed for first contact scenarios. 3 days later, they received a response. It came through quantum channels that shouldn't have been possible for a species they'd never contacted. The message was brief, transmitted in perfect Federation standard despite no previous communication. "Federation Council. Message received and understood. Relief force is being organized. Estimated arrival in your space, 72 standard hours. Hold your positions. Help is coming. Terran United Defense Command." The response puzzled everyone. How had they learned Federation standards so quickly? How were they using quantum communication? Most importantly, what kind of relief force could a single death world possibly send? Admiral Zextal ran probability calculations through the tactical computers. Even if their entire planet is militarized, we're looking at maybe a few hundred ships at most. Probably primitive by our standards. "Better than nothing," Veltar replied, though doubt crept into his voice. The Vorthan Empire had over 3,000 battlecruisers, each one capable of glassing a planet. Their technology was centuries ahead of the Federation, their tactics brutal and efficient. They'd conquered 17 systems in the past galactic year alone. As reports continued flooding in about Vorthan advances, the Federation fleet retreated to the fortified Centauri system. If the humans were coming, this would be where they'd make their stand. Defensive platforms powered up, shields were raised, and every available ship took position. "Long-range sensors are detecting something," announced the sensor operator, his voice uncertain. "Multiple contacts approaching from the Sol system vector." "How many?" Admiral Zextal asked. I'm not sure, sir. The readings are confused. Either our sensors are malfunctioning, or what? Or there are thousands of them." The main display shifted to show the approaching signatures. What they saw made no sense. The sensor returns suggested a fleet so massive it defied comprehension. Ships of every size imaginable, from small fighters to vessels larger than Federation dreadnoughts. "That's impossible," breathed the crystalline ambassador. "No single world could support that kind of fleet." "Maybe they're not from a single world," suggested the Etherian representative quietly. As the fleet drew closer, individual ship signatures became clearer. The humans had sent everything. Massive carrier groups, battle fleets, assault formations, support vessels, and ship classes that didn't match any known configuration. "Sir," the communications officer reported, his voice shaking slightly. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead ship." "Put it through." The holographic display activated, revealing a human for the first time. The bipedal creature looked remarkably similar to several known species, but there was something different about the eyes. They held an intensity that spoke of predatory evolution, of survival against impossible odds. "Federation Command, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran vessel Indomitable. We've received your distress call. Our fleet is prepared to assist in your defense against the Vorthan Empire." Admiral Zextal found his voice with difficulty. "Admiral Chen, we appreciate your response, but you should know what you're facing. The Vorthans have superior technology and numbers. This isn't a small conflict." The human's expression didn't change. "Admiral, we've reviewed your tactical data and intelligence reports. We understand the threat level. How many ships do you have?" Veltar interrupted. Admiral Chen smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both reassuring and terrifying. "Our current task force consists of 12,000 combat vessels, with another 8,000 support ships. We've also brought mobile shipyards, medical facilities, and supply chains for extended operations." The silence that followed was deafening. 20,000 ships from a single world that they'd dismissed as a death world inhabited by primitives. "Admiral," Zextal managed to say, "where did you get that many ships?" "We built them," Chen replied simply. "When you've spent your entire history fighting each other on a world that's actively trying to kill you, you get pretty good at building things that can survive anything. The galaxy's been peaceful for too long, Admiral. You've forgotten how to fight a real war." As the human fleet took position around the Federation forces, long-range sensors detected something else. The Vorthan Empire's main battle fleet was approaching, confident in their superiority, unaware that everything had just changed. "Admiral Chen," Veltar said quietly, "what exactly are humans?" The human's smile widened slightly. "We're the species that turned a death world into a garden, Counselor. And now we're going to show the Vorthans what happens when you threaten our new neighbors." The Vorthan Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace with characteristic arrogance. 3,000 battlecruisers arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming black against the stars. For 5 centuries, this sight had meant certain death for any opposition. Fleet Commander Thexvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, reviewing the tactical display with satisfaction. The Federation had gathered their remaining forces at Centauri, just as predicted. It would be a simple matter to crush them completely. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "long-range sensors detect Federation forces as expected. However, there appear to be additional ships present." "Reinforcements?" Thexvar asked dismissively. "From which species?" "Unknown, sir. The ship configurations don't match any known Federation designs. Energy signatures are unusual." Thexvar examined the sensor data with growing interest. The unknown ships were arranged in defensive formations around the Federation fleet, but their technology seemed primitive. chemical rockets, kinetic weapons, basic energy shields. Probably some backwater species they've dragged into this, he decided. Begin the assault. Standard formation. We'll crush the unknowns first to demoralize the Federation forces. The Vorthan fleet advanced in perfect synchronization, a demonstration of military precision that had conquered half the galaxy. Their advanced shields shimmered with energy, their plasma cannons charged for maximum devastation. Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from the unknown fleet. Put it through. Let's hear them beg. The holographic display activated, showing a human female in what appeared to be a primitive military uniform. Thexvar noted the creature's small size and apparent fragility with amusement. Vorthan vessels, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You are approaching Federation space with hostile intent. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The Vorthan bridge crew burst into laughter. Thexvar allowed himself a moment of cruel amusement before responding. Primitive creature, you dare threaten the Vorthan Empire? We have conquered civilizations across this galaxy. Your pathetic fleet will be destroyed in minutes. Admiral Chen's expression remained unchanged. Fleet Commander, I'll give you one final warning. Turn around and leave this system. You don't want to fight us. And why is that, little creature? Because, Chen replied calmly, we're really good at it. Thexvar gestured dismissively. Weapons range in 30 seconds. Prepare to witness Vorthan superiority. As the two fleets closed distance, the tactical displays showed the massive difference in technology levels. Vorthan shields were rated for gigawatt impacts. Their hulls were composed of quantum-bonded materials that could withstand the pressure at a star's core. Their weapons could crack planets. The human ships, by comparison, appeared to be constructed of primitive alloys and ceramic composites. Their weapons were primarily kinetic projectiles and basic energy beams. Any reasonable analysis suggested the humans would be obliterated within minutes. Entering weapons range now, sir, reported the tactical officer. All ships, open fire. Show these primitives the futility of opposing us. 3,000 Vorthan vessels unleashed a coordinated barrage that lit up space itself. Plasma beams capable of melting asteroids lanced toward the human fleet. The energy release was visible across 3 star systems. The human response was immediate and completely unexpected. Instead of trying to absorb the damage, the human ships moved. Not in the predictable patterns that military computers could calculate, but in chaotic, seemingly random directions that somehow avoided 90% of the incoming fire. The few shots that connected were absorbed by defensive systems that shouldn't have been possible with primitive technology. What just happened? Thexvar demanded. Sir, their evasion patterns are unlike anything in our tactical databases. It's almost like they knew where we were going to shoot before we fired. The human fleet's response came in the form of kinetic projectiles. Simple metal slugs accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. The Vorthan crews barely registered the incoming fire before it struck. The impacts were devastating. Kinetic weapons bypassed energy shields designed to stop plasma and particle beams. Simple metal projectiles punched through quantum-bonded armor like it was paper, causing catastrophic damage to 17 Vorthan cruisers in the first salvo. Impossible, Thexvar whispered. Our armor should be invulnerable to kinetic weapons. Sir, their projectiles are moving at 0.75 light speed. At that velocity, even basic metals achieve penetration values that exceed our defensive ratings. How are they accelerating projectiles to those speeds with primitive technology? The tactical officer studied his displays frantically. Unknown, sir. Our sensors show basic magnetic acceleration systems, but the power requirements should be impossible with their energy generation. The second human salvo arrived before the Vorthan fleet could respond. This time, the projectiles were different. Instead of simple metal slugs, they appeared to be sophisticated penetrator rounds designed to maximize internal damage. 43 more Vorthan vessels suffered critical hits. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Thexvar ordered. Return fire immediately. But the humans had already moved again. Their fleet scattered in all directions, making targeting solutions impossible. Individual human ships engaged Vorthan vessels in close combat, using tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. A human destroyer accelerated directly toward a Vorthan battlecruiser, ignoring the massive firepower directed at it. At the last moment, it fired a spread of projectiles directly into the larger ship's forward armor, then veered away at accelerations that should have killed any crew aboard. "How are they surviving those acceleration forces?" the navigation officer asked in bewilderment. "Sir," the communications officer reported urgently, "we're receiving tactical data from the damaged ships. The human projectiles aren't just kinetic weapons. They're delivering secondary payloads." "What kind of payloads?" "Unknown substances that appear to be eating through our internal systems. Some kind of molecular disassembly process." Thexvar felt the first stirring of real concern. "Are you telling me they're using biological weapons?" "Negative, sir. These appear to be self-replicating nanomachines designed specifically to counter our hull materials. They're systematically dismantling our ships from the inside." The tactical display showed a situation that was rapidly becoming a nightmare. Human ships darted between Vorthan formations like insects, delivering precise strikes that caused disproportionate damage. Their movements seemed to anticipate Vorthan tactics, as if they were reading their opponents' minds. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "massive energy buildup detected in the human fleet. Unknown weapon type powering up." Thexvar watched in growing horror as several human ships configured themselves into a formation he'd never seen before. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the sensors could accurately measure. "What are they doing?" "Unknown, sir. Energy output is exceeding our measurement capabilities. Recommend immediate withdrawal to safe distance. The Vorthan Empire does not retreat." Thexvar snarled. "All ships, concentrate fire on those vessels before they can discharge their weapons." But it was already too late. The human formation released something that wasn't quite energy and wasn't quite matter. It crossed the space between fleets instantaneously and struck the Vorthan flagship's shields with impossible force. The Eternal Dominion's shields, rated to withstand direct star impact, simply ceased to exist. The mysterious weapon passed through the ship's armor as if it wasn't there, causing every system on board to fail simultaneously. "Sir," the emergency lighting cast airy shadows across the tactical officer's face, "we've lost main power, shields, weapons, life support, and navigation. We're dead in space." Through the flickering displays, Thexvar watched his fleet falling apart. Human ships moved through the Vorthan formation like predators among prey, delivering precise strikes that disabled rather than destroyed. It was as if they wanted to capture the ships intact. "Sir," the communications officer managed to report through backup systems, "the humans are transmitting surrender demands." Admiral Chen's image appeared on the failing hologram, as calm as when the battle began. "Fleet Commander Thexvar, your fleet is disabled. Surrender now and your crews will be treated according to interstellar law." "How?" Thexvar asked, his voice barely a whisper. "How did you defeat us so easily?" Chen's expression remained professional, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of countless battles fought against impossible odds. "Commander, you've spent centuries conquering peaceful civilizations. We've spent millennia fighting each other on a world that's been trying to kill us since we first crawled out of the caves. This wasn't a battle. This was a learning experience." The aftermath of the battle left the Federation representatives speechless. In less than 2 hours, the mighty Vorthan Empire's main fleet had been completely disabled by humans using what appeared to be primitive technology. Admiral Zextal stood on the observation deck of his flagship, watching human ships methodically securing the captured Vorthan vessels. "How?" Counselor Veltar asked for the 100th time. "Our best estimates gave the Vorthans a technological advantage of at least 3 centuries. How did a Deathworld species defeat them so easily?" Admiral Chen materialized on the holographic communicator, her image sharp despite the quantum interference from the disabled Vorthan ships. "Counselor, we'd like to invite your leadership aboard our command ship for a briefing. I think it's time you understood what humans really are." An hour later, a Federation diplomatic shuttle approached the Terran flagship. The ship's design bewildered the alien observers. Where Federation and Vorthan vessels were smooth, elegant constructions optimized for efficiency, the human ship appeared to be built like a weapon itself. Every surface bristled with additional armor, redundant systems, and what appeared to be last resort weapons. "It looks like they expect their own ships to be shot," observed the Etherian representative. "More like they expect everything to try to kill them," corrected Admiral Zextal grimly. The shuttle bay that received them was enormous, easily capable of holding 100 Federation vessels. But what caught their attention were the other ships present. Fighters that looked like they'd been through multiple battles, their hulls scarred but still functional. Support craft with armor that had been replaced so many times the vessels resembled patchwork quilts. These ships have seen extensive combat, noted Veltar. But, against whom? They said their world was isolated. Admiral Chen met them personally, accompanied by officers representing different branches of what they learned was called the Terran Defense Force. The humans were remarkably similar to several known species, but there were subtle differences that spoke of evolutionary pressures unknown in civilized space. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable," Chen said, leading them through corridors that seemed designed for combat rather than comfort. "Before we begin the briefing, I want you to understand something important. Humans didn't defeat the Vorthans because we have superior technology. We defeated them because we think differently." The briefing room was stark and functional, dominated by a three-dimensional tactical display showing the recent battle from multiple angles. But around the walls were smaller displays showing something else entirely: historical battles, technological development timelines, and what appeared to be casualty statistics spanning millennia. "Gentlemen," Admiral Chen began, "you made a fundamental error in your assumptions about Earth. You classified it as a death world and assumed that meant it was barely habitable. In reality, Earth didn't just try to kill us. It succeeded. Repeatedly." The tactical display shifted to show a timeline of human history. Wars, natural disasters, extinction events, and technological revolutions compressed into a visual representation that made the assembled aliens realize they were looking at a species that had faced annihilation thousands of times. "Every few thousand years, something tried to wipe us out completely," explained Colonel Martinez, the human military historian. "Ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, plague, and, when we got advanced enough, ourselves. The species you're talking to now represents the survivors of survival." "We don't understand," admitted the crystalline ambassador. "Natural selection on steroids," Chen replied. "Every major catastrophe killed off 90% or more of the human population. Only the most adaptable, most aggressive, most creative individuals survived to reproduce. This happened repeatedly over millions of years." Admiral Zextal studied the historical data with growing comprehension. "You're saying your entire species is descended from the survivors of multiple near extinctions?" "Not just near extinctions. Actual extinctions. We've technically gone extinct 17 times in our recorded history. Each time, small populations survived in isolated areas and repopulate the planet. But here's the important part: each time we came back stronger." The display showed human technological development compared to galactic norms. Where most species develop technology in steady, predictable curves, human advancement came in explosive bursts triggered by existential threats. "You developed nuclear weapons before achieving spaceflight," observed the Etherian representative with horror. "We developed nuclear weapons because we were trying to kill each other more efficiently," confirmed Colonel Martinez. "Then, we realized the same technology could power spacecraft. Most of our greatest technological advances came from trying to solve the problem of not dying." Admiral Chen activated another series of displays showing human military doctrine. "When you've spent your entire evolutionary history fighting for survival, you develop certain approaches to conflict that peaceful species don't understand." The tactical analysis of the recent battle played out in slow motion. The aliens watched in fascination as human ships employed strategies that violated every accepted principle of civilized warfare. "You targeted non-essential systems first," Veltar observed. "Why disable rather than destroy?" "Because," Chen explained, "we've learned that destroying your enemy completely often creates more problems than it solves. Better to remove their ability to fight while preserving their ability to surrender. It's more efficient in the long term." "But how did you anticipate their tactics so accurately?" Colonel Martinez smiled grimly. "Because the Vorthan Empire uses the same strategies we developed and abandoned 3,000 years ago. Overwhelming technological superiority, rigid military hierarchies, predictable tactical doctrine. We know those strategies intimately because we used them when we were young and stupid." "Young and stupid," echoed Admiral Zextal. "Every human military academy studies something called the classical period," Chen explained. "About 4,000 years ago, when we first achieved global civilization. We tried to fight wars the way the Vorthans do now. massive technological advantages, overwhelming force, predictable strategies. It nearly destroyed us. The display showed a series of historical conflicts that had escalated beyond all reason, culminating in the near destruction of human civilization. We learned that superior technology is worthless if your enemy can adapt faster than you can deploy it. So we developed adaptive warfare. Adaptive warfare? Veltar leaned forward intently. Fighting smart instead of fighting hard, Martinez explained. Use the enemy's advantages against them. Turn their strengths into weaknesses. Make them fight on your terms instead of theirs. Admiral Chen activated a real-time display showing human ships throughout the captured Vorthan fleet. Right now, our engineering teams are studying every piece of Vorthan technology. Within 6 months, we'll understand their systems better than they do. Within a year, we'll be producing improved versions. How is that possible? Because survival depends on learning from every encounter. Every battle teaches us something new. Every enemy shows us a new way to think about problems. The Vorthans have been using the same technology for centuries without facing real opposition. They've forgotten how to innovate. The briefing continued for hours, covering human history, psychology, and military philosophy. The Federation representatives gradually understood they were dealing with something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had evolved specifically to overcome impossible odds. There's something else you need to know, Admiral Chen said as the briefing concluded. The fleet you've seen isn't our main military force. It's our rapid response unit. The silence that followed was profound. Rapid response? Admiral Zextal asked weakly. 20,000 ships designed for immediate deployment anywhere in human space. Our actual military consists of approximately 2 million active vessels, with production capacity for 10 million more within a standard year. 2 million ships? Veltar's voice was barely audible. Plus orbital platforms, system defense networks, and mobile shipyards. When you've spent your entire history preparing for extinction, you tend to build redundant systems. Colonel Martinez activated a final display showing human space. Hundreds of star systems, massive orbital installations, and fleet concentrations that dwarfed anything in known space. How long have you been spacefaring? Asked the Etherian representative. About 8,000 years, Chen replied casually. We've been exploring the galaxy longer than most of your species have had written language. We just didn't see the point in making contact until now. Why now? Admiral Chan's expression grew serious. Because the Vorthan Empire represents something we can't ignore. They're using conquest and genocide as tools of expansion. That's a problem we've seen before, and we know where it leads. Where does it lead? Extinction, Chen said simply. Not just for their enemies, but, eventually for them too. Aggressive expansion without sustainable limits always ends in collapse. The question is how much of the galaxy dies before that happens. The Federation representatives exchanged glances, finally, understanding the magnitude of what they had unleashed. They had called for help from a Deathworld and received an answer from humanity itself, a species that had turned survival into an art form. 3 weeks after the Battle of Senari, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. News of the Vorthan Empire's defeat spread through every civilized system, carried by quantum relay networks and independent traders. The impossible had happened. Someone had not only resisted the Vorthans, but completely annihilated their primary fleet. Emperor Vexthal the Eternal received the reports in his throne chamber on the fortress world of Vorth Prime. The massive alien ruler had conquered 47 systems personally and ruled an empire spanning half the galaxy. The news of his fleet's destruction struck him like a physical blow. Explain to me again, he growled at the trembling communications officer, how 3,000 of my finest ships were defeated by primitives from a Deathworld. My Emperor, the officer replied carefully, our surviving commanders report that the humans use tactics and technology combinations we've never encountered. They seem to anticipate our every move. Anticipate? Or did someone provide them with our tactical databases? Unknown, my Emperor. Fleet Commander Thexvar is being held prisoner aboard the human flagship. We've received no ransom demands. Vexthal stood, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. At 12 feet tall and weighing nearly half a ton, he was an apex predator whose species had evolved on a high-gravity world. His ancestors had conquered their planet through sheer physical dominance, then carried that philosophy to the stars. Prepare the second and third fleets, he commanded. 6,000 ships. We'll show these humans what real power looks like. My Emperor, the tactical advisor interjected nervously, perhaps we should gather intelligence first. We know nothing about their capabilities. We know they defeated one fleet through trickery and surprise, Vexthal snarled. They won't have that advantage again. But, unknown to the Emperor, human intelligence had been monitoring Vorthan communications since the moment their fleet arrived in Federation space. Captain Lisa Rodriguez of Terran Intelligence stood in the briefing room aboard the Indomitable, presenting her findings to Admiral Chan and the Federation leadership. The Vorthans are mobilizing everything, Rodriguez reported. 6,000 ships from their reserve fleets, plus they're calling in forces from occupied territories. They're treating this as an existential threat. Smart of them, Admiral Chan observed. It is. Admiral Zextal studied the intelligence data with confusion. Why are you showing this to us? Surely your forces can handle whatever they send. Chen smiled grimly. Admiral, defeating the Vorthans militarily is the easy part. The hard part is what comes after. You can't build a sustainable peace through conquest alone. What do you mean? The Vorthan Empire controls 300 star systems. Billions of sentient beings live under their rule. If we simply destroy their military, those systems will collapse into chaos. Billions will die in the resulting civil wars and economic collapse. Counselor Veltar leaned forward intently. You're saying you won't fight them? I'm saying we won't fight them the way you expect us to. We're going to solve the problem permanently. Captain Rodriguez activated a new display showing the Vorthan Empire's internal structure. Our intelligence indicates that the Empire is not as unified as it appears. Dozens of subject species are held in line through fear and superior technology. If the central authority is removed carefully, many systems will revert to independence rather than collapse. You're planning to dismantle their entire empire, Admiral Zextal realized. We're planning to give their subject species the tools to liberate themselves, Chen corrected. It's more efficient and creates better long-term stability. The next phase of the human strategy began immediately. Instead of massing for a direct assault on Vorthan space, human ships scattered throughout the galaxy. Small task forces appeared in systems the Vorthans considered secure, but, instead of attacking military targets, they made contact with local resistance movements. On the mining world of Kepler 442, a human diplomatic team materialized in the middle of a secret meeting of the underground Draconian Liberation Front. The aliens froze in terror, expecting immediate death or capture. Greetings, said Commander Sarah Kim through a universal translator. We understand you've been fighting for independence from the Vorthan Empire. We'd like to help. Within hours, human technical advisors were showing the Draconians how to build shield generators from mining equipment and how to convert cargo haulers into gunships. More importantly, they shared intelligence about Vorthan military movements and weak points in their occupation forces. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. The humans seemed to appear wherever there was resistance to Vorthan rule, offering exactly the kind of support each group needed most. Advanced weapons for fighters, medical supplies for refugee camps, communication equipment for coordination between groups. How are they everywhere at once? Demanded General KYTHVAR, the Vorthan military commander responsible for internal security. We have reports of human activity in 30 different systems simultaneously. They appear to have significantly more ships than we initially estimated, his intelligence officer replied nervously. Also, their ships are smaller and more maneuverable than our designs. They can operate in areas where our vessels cannot go. What kind of areas? Asteroid fields, gas giant atmospheres, solar coronas. Environments we consider too dangerous for normal operations. On the fortress world of Vorth Prime, Emperor Vexthal received increasingly desperate reports from his provincial governors. Rebellions were erupting everywhere, but these weren't random uprisings. They were coordinated, well-equipped, and seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. The humans are destabilizing our entire empire, reported his chief advisor. Our forces are stretched too thin to respond to all the insurgencies. Then, we strike at the source, the Emperor growled. Dispatch the combined fleet to destroy their home world. If we eliminate Earth, their expansion stops immediately. But, when the Vorthan fleet arrived in the Sol system, they found something that defied all logic. Earth was defended by a network of orbital platforms that spanned the entire system. Massive space stations, weapons platforms, and defensive installations that made their own fortified worlds look primitive by comparison. "How many defensive platforms are we detecting?" asked Fleet Commander Grix Tal. "Over 10,000 major installations," replied his sensor officer weakly. "Plus approximately 50,000 smaller platforms. And, Admiral, the energy signatures are enormous. Some of these stations are more heavily armed than our dreadnoughts." "Impossible. No single world could support that kind of infrastructure." Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channel with the same calm professionalism she'd shown at Centauri. "Vorthan Fleet, this is Terra Defense Command. You are entering the Sol system without authorization. State your intentions." "Human," Grix Tal replied with forced confidence, "we are here to accept your surrender. Your interference in Imperial affairs ends now." "I see. And how exactly do you plan to enforce that demand?" The Vorthan commander studied his tactical displays, looking for weaknesses in the human defenses. What he saw made no tactical sense. The orbital platforms were positioned not just to defend Earth, but to create overlapping fields of fire that could destroy any approaching fleet several times over. "Admiral," his tactical officer whispered, "these defense grids are designed to repel an invasion force 10 times our size." "How did they know we were coming?" "Because," Admiral Chen's voice replied over an open channel, "we've been monitoring your communications for weeks. We know about your troop dispositions, your supply lines, your backup plans, and your Emperor's personal schedule." The tactical display suddenly showed Vorthan positions throughout their empire, marked with perfect accuracy. Every ship, every base, every strategic resource clearly identified and tracked. "You see, Commander," Chen continued, "while you've been preparing for a conventional war, 6 months after the fall of the Vorthan Empire, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. Former imperial worlds were rebuilding as independent nations or voluntary federations. Trade routes that had been closed for centuries reopened. Species that had been enslaved for generations were learning to govern themselves again." Admiral Chen stood in the observation lounge of the Indomitable, watching a convoy of Federation relief ships delivering supplies to the former Vorthan colony of New Dracosia. The irony wasn't lost on her that the same Federation that had once begged for human help was now coordinating the largest humanitarian effort in galactic history. "Remarkable," observed Counselor Veltar, joining her at the viewing port. 300 star systems transitioning to independence simultaneously, and minimal violence. "How did you predict this outcome?" "We didn't predict it," Chen replied. "We planned for it. There's a difference." The past 6 months had been a masterclass in what humans called strategic patience. Instead of imposing their own government on former Vorthan worlds, human advisors had worked with local populations to establish systems that fit their unique cultures and needs. The results were as diverse as the species themselves. "The Crystalline Collective chose a hive mind democracy," reported Captain Rodriguez, reading from her datapad. "The Draconian worlds established a confederation of city-states. The Etherian systems are experimenting with something they call consensus reality governance that we don't entirely understand. But they're all working," Veltar marveled. "How is that possible?" "Because," Chen explained, "we didn't try to force them into human-shaped boxes. We helped them build systems that matched how they actually think and organize naturally." Admiral Zextal approached their group, his multiple arms carrying various reports and data tablets. "The economic integration is proceeding faster than our most optimistic projections. Former imperial trade routes are being converted to mutual benefit agreements. Even the transportation guilds are cooperating." The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Some Vorthan military commanders had attempted to maintain control over isolated systems, leading to brief conflicts that human forces resolved with surgical precision. More difficult were the worlds where imperial rule had lasted so long that entire generations had no experience with self-governance. "The rehabilitation centers are reporting success rates above 90%, Rodriguez continued. Former imperial military personnel are being integrated into planetary defense forces or civilian occupations. Even high-ranking officers are adapting to the new reality." "Including Emperor Vexthal?" Chen asked. "Especially him. Our psychological evaluation team says he's experiencing what humans call an identity crisis. Turns out that underneath the conqueror persona, he's actually quite intelligent. He's been asking to study human governmental theory. The transformation of the former emperor had been one of the most surprising developments. Stripped of his absolute power but treated with dignity rather than executed, Vexthal had gradually revealed a sharp intellect that had been warped by millennia of unchallenged authority. Human psychologists were working with him to understand how apex predator species could develop sustainable leadership models. "What's the status of the integration protocols?" Chen asked. Ahead of schedule, Zextal reported with satisfaction. 47 former Imperial worlds have requested Federation membership. Another 132 are establishing independent governments with mutual defense pacts. The remaining systems are choosing various forms of confederation. "And the humans?" Veltar asked quietly. "What do your people want from all this?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching the relief ships distribute supplies to beings whose ancestors had been enslaved by the Vorthans. "Counselor, do you know what the most dangerous predator on Earth is?" "I assume it's humans." "No. It's a microscopic organism called a virus. Viruses are dangerous not because they're strong or fast, but because they're adaptable. They survive by changing themselves to match whatever environment they encounter." "I don't understand the relevance." "Humans evolved to be the antivirus," Chen explained. "We survive by changing our environment to match what we need. But we learned something important during our history: if you change the environment too much, you destroy the ecosystem that supports you." She gestured toward the relief convoy. "We don't want to rule the galaxy, Counselor. We want to make it stable enough that we can live in it without constantly fighting for survival. A galaxy full of independent, prosperous civilizations is much safer for humans than an empire we have to constantly police." "So this was all about human security?" "Partially. But, also." Chen paused, choosing her words carefully. "When you've survived as many near extinctions as humans have, you develop a deep appreciation for diversity. Every species that goes extinct is knowledge lost forever. Every civilization that collapses is a unique way of solving problems that disappears." Captain Rodriguez looked up from her datapad. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. The Galactic Assembly is convening for the first time in 3 centuries. The Galactic Assembly had been the galaxy's attempt at democratic governance before the rise of the Vorthan Empire. Representatives from all known species would meet to discuss common challenges and establish frameworks for peaceful interaction. The Vorthans had destroyed it by conquering most of the member species. "How many civilizations are sending delegates?" Veltar asked. "Over 800, Rodriguez replied with amazement. "Including species we'd never made contact with before." Apparently, news of the Empire's fall has encouraged a lot of isolated civilizations to reveal themselves. 800 species? Admiral Zextel's compound eyes widened. "We estimated there were maybe 200 intelligent species in the galaxy." "Intelligence takes many forms," Chen observed. "Some species developed space travel but chose not to explore. Others achieved advanced technology but remained hidden. The Vorthans were so aggressive that most civilizations went into hiding rather than risk conquest. And now they're coming out. Because the threat is gone, and they see an opportunity to build something better." The journey to the assembly location took 2 weeks, time that human diplomats used to conduct preliminary negotiations with dozens of species. The humans had insisted on a rotating location for the assembly, arguing that no single world should have the advantage of hosting such an important institution. The chosen location was spectacular, a massive space station constructed in the gravity-neutral zone between 3 star systems. Human engineers had designed it specifically for the assembly, with environmental zones suitable for every known form of intelligent life. "It's beautiful," Veltar breathed as their shuttle approached the station. The structure resembled a vast flower, with petals extending in all directions to accommodate different atmospheric and gravitational requirements. At its center was a common area where all species could interact safely. "How did you build this so quickly?" Zextal asked. "We didn't," Chen replied. "We've been building it for the past 50 years. 50 years? But you only made contact 6 months ago." "We've been monitoring galactic civilization for centuries, Admiral. We knew that eventually, either the Vorthans would have to be stopped, or they would destroy most intelligent life in the galaxy. We've been preparing for both possibilities." As their shuttle docked, they could see vessels from hundreds of different civilizations. Ship designs that ranged from elegant crystalline constructs to massive biological organisms that were apparently living spacecraft. The preliminary sessions have been remarkable, reported Ambassador Williams, the lead human diplomat. Species are sharing technologies and cultural knowledge that's been hidden for millennia. We're seeing collaborative solutions to problems that have plagued individual civilizations for centuries. Any conflicts? Chen asked. Minor territorial disputes, mostly. Nothing that can't be resolved through negotiation. The interesting development is how many species are requesting human mediation. Mediation? They see us as neutral arbiters. We don't have territorial ambitions, we demonstrated that we can defeat military threats, and our solutions tend to benefit everyone rather than just ourselves. The formal assembly sessions began with a moment of silence for the billions who had died under imperial rule. Then, in a gesture that surprised everyone, former Emperor Vexthal addressed the assembly. Fellow beings, he said, his massive form somehow conveying humility despite his intimidating appearance, I stand before you as proof that any species can choose a different path. The human showed us that strength without wisdom leads to destruction. I ask your forgiveness for the crimes of my empire, and offer what knowledge I possess to ensure such atrocities never happen again. The speech was met with stunned silence, then, gradually building applause. Species that had suffered under Vorthan rule stood to acknowledge his words. That, Admiral Chen murmured to her companions, is how you build lasting peace. Not through conquest, but through the courage to admit mistakes and choose better. The assembly sessions continued for weeks, establishing frameworks for trade, dispute resolution, scientific cooperation, and mutual defense. But the most important outcome was something intangible: hope. For the first time in centuries, Counselor Veltar observed on the final day, the galaxy feels safe. Not because there's no threat, but because we've proven we can face threats together. Admiral Chen nodded, watching representatives from 800 species work together to build something unprecedented in galactic history. That's the real power of humanity, Counselor. Not our weapons or our technology, but our stubborn refusal to accept that problems can't be solved. And what's next for humans? The same thing we've always done, Chen replied with a smile. We survive, we adapt, and we make sure everyone else gets the chance to do the same. As the assembly concluded and delegates returned to their home worlds, the galaxy began a new chapter in its history. The Age of Empires was over. The Age of Cooperation had begun. And, somewhere in the Sol system, humanity continued doing what it did best, turning impossible odds into new possibilities.